Welcome everyone. My name's Gareth Parks and I'm going to be hosting today's session where we take you through the launch event for the Project Data Analytics Task Force and talk you through the white paper that we're launching as we go. I can see that everybody's already starting to get the hang of Mentimeter, which is great. So there are 4 different ways that you'll be able to interact with us over the course of this session. So you can answer the questions that many of you have already started to do in terms of typing in and adding in your answers to those questions. There are comments that you can put onto each of the slides that we've got, and they'll start to pop up on screen. And then you can also sort of like or heart those slides too. And then finally, we've got a Q&A session at the end of this, and we'll take you through a whole series of the panel session there. And so that's all through menti.com, and then the code is there. It's very easy and straightforward to get onto it once you get there. So fantastic. I can see that we've got lots of people joining from lots and lots of different places. Is it worth just we've got lots and lots of different parts of the UK, which is brilliant. Lots of see Stockholm represented, so we're starting to get further afield as well. Fantastic. Now that everyone's got the hang of that, should we move on to our next question? Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about you, just for all of our panelists, so that they've got more of a sense of the sectors and the industries that you're coming from, just so that we've got an understanding of who it is that we're talking to. So engineering, defense, technology, IT, financial services, what else? Project management. Excellent. We're getting all of the sectors that we're catering to. Rail, healthcare. Wow, this is fantastic. Coming from everywhere. FMCG, pharmaceuticals. That's yeah, a real mix from all over. That's really exciting and brilliant to see. Fantastic. Well, I think we can move on to the next question. Third question, and again, we can do this quite quickly in terms of the roles that you've got within each of these different organisations. What is it that you do for a day job? Lots of project managers, lots of consultants, yeah, program managers, data analysts, quantity surveyors, PMO managers, operations directors, IT managers, yeah, portfolio managers. Brilliant. Lots and lots of different job roles and job families that we're catering to. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so final question then before we get going. What's your experience of project data analytics so far? On a sort of, yeah, of these 4 different options, you've never come across it. This is your first introduction to it. You're aware, and you've sort of heard of it, but not much more. You understand some of the principles, and then finally you're very much plugged in and feeding into the latest developments. There we go. Okay, so majority then understanding the principles. There's a really good proportion that have that are really plugged in and very aware of the journey that we're going through here. And then what's fantastic is we've got a really strong minority of people that are new. So welcome to those who've come to this as a first time. So what I'd like to do now that we've got a sense of what's going on, just very quickly talk you through the agenda for the session, and then from there I'll hand over to our first speaker. So that's going to be Professor Tim Broyd, who's going to talk us through some opening remarks. We'll then pass on to Andy Murray, who's going to talk through the challenge that we're facing before handing over to Dr. Alex Budzier, who'll talk us through some of the numbers and the business case. From there, we've got 4 different industry perspectives, and at that point, I'll introduce each of the sort of the industry panelists that'll take you through 4 different sectors and the work that's going on in each of those different sectors from a project data analytics perspective. After that, we'll get into the detail of the action plan and the ambition that we have and how we think we can achieve the vision that we're setting out, and that'll be done by Martin Paver. From there, we'll go into a panel session, open the floor to questions from you all. So if there are any questions that you've got, then make sure to mark those down, and we'll pick those up at the end. And then finally, I'll pass back to Tim, who's going to talk us through some final remarks. So just very, very quickly before I do pass to Tim, these are all of the different members of the task force. So we've got lots and lots of different representatives. 8 of them are going to be speaking to you today. So I'm not going to, as we introduce those, I'm not going to talk you through everyone on the list. Just to say that what we've tried to do here with the task force is make sure that there is representation from as broad a different sort of group of people as possible. So we have government, we have academia, we have industry bodies, and we have industry, we have small businesses that are all represented across the task force. And as well, each of the members of the task force are taking a lead on one of the work streams that you'll hear more about over the course of the session. So I'll just pick up those that aren't going to be speaking. We've got Alex Robertson, who is a director at Petrofac. We've got Ben Jones from Heathrow. We've got Greg Lawton, who's the chief exec of Nodes and Links. And then we've got Joe Jolly, who's director at the Environment Agency. So with that, what I'd like to do now is pass over to our first speaker. So Professor Tim Broyd, who's the director at UCL, and is going to get us started. So Tim, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gareth, and good morning to most people. Good afternoon if you're in Stockholm. I thought I saw someone from Peru on the list, so good night, I suppose, in Peru. Yeah, I'm Tim Broyd. I'm a professor of built environment foresight now at UCL, and also the founding director of the UCL Institute for Digital Innovation in the Built Environment. I've been at UCL 8 years tomorrow, and the former parts of my career were really all in industry, and significantly with 2 good names that have now more or less left us, Atkins and Halcrow. And for both of those, I was in a corporate role as Director of Research, Technology and Innovation. And I've been actively engaged in what we might now call the digital transformation of certainly the construction and infrastructure industries for about 25 years. Now, we started with playing with numbers in Atkins in the mid-90s, looking at how we might integrate data, play with systems, seeing what would work and what we could do. And through that, we gained an increasing understanding of how you could turn data into information, into knowledge. But separately, through that, I gained a much better understanding than I had beforehand, that in this sort of change in an industry or a company, let alone an industry, of a technology-enabled change, about 10% of it is actually the technology. About 20% is changing processes. The rest, about 2/3, 70%, whatever, is about changing the culture and the perception of people working in the industry. We've made a lot of progress over the last 10 to 20 years. We now have BIM that's working reasonably well, not as well as we'd like yet. We're talking about digital twins and maybe actually starting to provide them, but we still cannot reliably take lessons on knowledge from one project to another. To our industry's failure, I'm absolutely sure. And it seems that we're not alone in that. As Gareth has said, we have Today we have individuals from the construction and aerospace industries, and we have a close engagement developing with nuclear and oil and gas sectors as well. We also have strong engagement with pan-sector bodies like the Office of National Statistics and the Open Data Institute. So today we're launching a new initiative to see how we can use data much better to transform project delivery. This is based on a number of months' deliberation by a task force I have the honour of co-chairing, and we will, in the next half hour, provide a summary of the context, the business case, the vision, a prospective roadmap, and a call to arms. We hope that you will find the next hour enjoyable, stimulating, but also pretty worrying. Worrying enough to convince you to answer that call and start to work with us to improve the way we work. I'm now delighted to hand over to Andy Murray, the Executive Director of the Major Projects Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tim. So I'm Andy Murray, the Exec Director of the Major Projects Association. For those unfamiliar with the association, its purpose is to improve the initiation and delivery of major projects through the interaction of our members in sharing experience, knowledge, research, and ideas. The association's members are very aware that for every great project, it only takes one poor one to undo investor and stakeholder confidence, which is why we support this initiative to transform project performance with data. It's also personally a privilege to be part of the Project Data Analytics Task Force and to set out today the context of our bold vision and to throw down the gauntlet for change. So I mentioned context, so let's start with that. Leading up to the current decade, individuals and organizations were already facing an accelerated pace of change brought about by digital transformation, urgency of action on climate change and aging populations, and various geopolitical changes. Fast forward to 2020, and governments, NGOs, and think tanks around the world are additionally predicting further change when we emerge from the depressed levels of economic activity caused by the pandemic. There is a general consensus that the recovery will be investment-led and will require organizations to reimagine their business or operating models. Or put another way, the recovery is dependent on new capital assets being commissioned and businesses embarking on significant change or transformation. Essentially, it's dependent on project performance. Unfortunately, we will hear from Dr. Alex shortly. The truth is, project performance is not great. When you measure project performance against the triple objectives of benefits, time, and budget, repeated studies show it is unacceptably, and I would say embarrassingly low. If we ever needed an upturn in capability and performance, it is now. There are lots of reasons why projects are difficult and performance is poor. And when I scan the back catalogue of journals and studies over the past 30 years that I've been involved in projects, there's one overarching conclusion that I make. We're not very good at learning lessons. I tried to nudge the profession's ability to learn lessons when I led the authoring team for the 2009 version of Prince 2. We introduced the learning from experience principle, and importantly, we characterized it as a pull rather than push responsibility. That is, it's everyone's duty to seek relevant lessons and apply them to their own project. I knew then that was easier said than done, as even with a pull mindset, lessons learned or learning lessons requires access to good data and the ability to intelligently process that data to gain applicable insight. The challenge with access to data is that whilst projects generate huge quantities of it, the data tends to be held in silos, whether that is within functional areas in an organization or across client and contractor boundaries. There simply isn't a single collective data source for many projects. And I guess that's the curse of the temporary nature of project organizations. If we consider access to good data rather than just access to data, the further challenge regarding good data is firstly, there is a lot of variability on units of measure. Secondly, data may be incomplete or limited to just dashboard or report content. And lastly, it is often manipulated or adjusted. This makes it difficult to compare like for like. So moving on from data and thinking about analytics, the challenge of data analytics is on the one hand that project professionals are lacking in data literacy, and on the other hand, data scientists are lacking in project literacy. Furthermore, a lot of analytical tools and practice are optimized for operational activities. So on an individual practitioner or for an individual project basis, we have an additional curse of the long cycle times and feedback loops. However, although every project is unique, there are high degrees of similarity at a functional and process level. We can use data science to identify, prioritize, and leverage these similarities so that every practitioner and everyone's project can learn from the hundreds or thousands of others where there's an element of equivalence. There's much to gain from optimizing our practice and making informed decisions based upon data analytics. The reason we're here today is because the world of projects has been slow to embrace the world of data analytics compared with other management disciplines, such as marketing, finance, and HR. Step changes in management practices do not happen by chance. They require a force to overcome the inertia of the status quo and direction to ensure the changes are genuinely for the better. We believe this requires an industry-led approach to unite the project community and the data science community around a common purpose. It requires project professionals to look up from the Gantt chart and see the possibilities, and data scientists or analysts to turn their attention from other management disciplines to the world of projects. And most importantly, it requires organizations to democratize and pool their data. It's time to catch up, collaborate, and collectively pick up the performance gauntlet. Together, we will go further than if we act alone. I will now hand over to Dr. Alex, who will explain the business case for a data-driven approach to transforming project performance as outlined in the task force white paper. Alex.
Well, thank you very much, Andy. So where I'm coming from in this particular instance is that here at the University of Oxford, we have studied the performance of projects and major projects for more than 10 years now. And I'm going to share with you some of those sort of insights that we have gained to, put some evidence behind some of the claims that you just heard in terms of actually we do have here a burning practice and burning platform, and we really should look at the practice of how we manage our projects and investigate this and increase the maturity, particularly through the use of digital technologies and the data analytics that sit behind it. With a particularly important point that I want to pick up from Andy's idea there, what Andy has mentioned, is that we have tons of data but very little insight. So why does it matter? If we look into the economic output, Murph, if you can look at Murph on to the next slide, there's a lot of work going on in projects, and there is a mega trend around internationally. There is a global mega trend of projectification of work. If we just look at the UK, here are some numbers in terms of how much work do we do every single year in something that is called a project, is organized. The project has the usual processes that you know from the project world. And there are some industries there that have a high degree of projectification, like construction, which is why we often talk about construction as the first one. But there are also others like professional services, the retail sector, manufacturing, and so on. And then there's some laggards in terms of the agricultural and sort of the real estate management operations business that is less projectified than others. But if we take a full view or sort of step back and look at some of those, sort of what does that mean in terms of economies, I picked out 3 here, Germany, my home country, but also the UK and the US. And you can see here that it's all roughly about a third of all hours worked every single year in these economies is done in the form of projects. If we sum this up, that actually means that projects themselves generate about 700 billion, more than that, 750 billion in GDP every year in the UK. And a recent study from last year by the Association of Project Management has looked at very specifically the contribution of project managers and came up with a number that is 156 billion. So not just everybody who works in projects, but just the value created by people who lead the project. So what we're talking about here is tremendously important to the way we work, the way we live, the way we want to live and transform our societies, and how we provide services and assets to our fellow citizens. However, the way we're doing this, how these 750 billion are generated annually, is probably less than ideal. If we sort of move to the next slide, there you can see how much we have our insights into the data on how these projects perform that create this massive amount of economic activity. And this is an overview of the research we've been doing here at Oxford for the last 10 years, more than 10 years now. And in total, we have looked at 12,000 projects across more than 25 different sectors, everything from construction, infrastructure, energy, all the way to IT and even mega events like Olympic Games. So that's 12,000 projects. And if we just look at the state of project management and how these projects deliver, you see here that about half of them deliver to budgets that were set earlier. And if we ask the question, how many also delivered not only to budget or better, but also on time or earlier, we're down to 1 in 12. And then if we ask the very crucial question in terms of what is not just the economic activity, but the benefits generated for current and future generations, and we ask the question, how many of these projects have delivered on time, on budget, and on benefits or better, then we actually see it's only 1 in 200 projects. So this trend that we see, that my colleague Ben has called sort of the iron law of projects, that projects tend to be over budget, over time, and under benefits over and over again, we see this as a trend that has not improved for as long as we have data, which spans over the last 30 years. And you might say that a lot of these things have also to do with the increasing complexity of projects. So on the one hand, while we have more data, even though I would argue we have less available insights, we also see that the world is getting ever more complex, and therefore it gets harder to understand and make sense of what we are proposing to do. And I think that is the first big challenge. The second big challenge, which is on the next slide, Merv, has to do with the productivity. If we look at data on specifically project-heavy sectors down there, construction, professional services, where the vast majority of work is organized in projects, we also see that there we see very little productivity improvements. Here you see OECD numbers that reach back for about 20 years. In the US, we have even data that goes, particularly for the construction industry, that goes further backwards into the 1960s. But what we see in these sectors is that productivity improvements have stayed flat, whereas in other industries that have digitized dramatically over the same time span, like IT, like agriculture, like manufacturing, where we see a much bigger uptake in terms of digital technologies, data insight, data-driven work, we see much, much bigger improvements. And even though you can say, since right, we're talking only here about productivity improvements in those sectors for about 3 percentage points year on year, you can clearly see here, or 3% year on year, you can see here the compound effects have really widened the gap in productivity in the last 20 years between industries that are digital leaders and industries that tend to be digital laggards. And that in total, I think, sums up the challenge of the business case. So in terms of this threefold idea that now 1 in 3 hours that anybody of us works across the economy, we spend working on projects. And that generates a lot of possibility and a lot of opportunities, because the current performance measured against the targets that we write down in business cases when we start this work in terms of being on cost or on budget, on time, and delivering benefits, we're lagging behind in this, but we're also lagging behind the improvement in the innovation and the productivity that we want to see, particularly in project-heavy industries. And this is why, as a task force, we have debated very long in terms of what should really be the aspiration for this. But we summed this up, and Murphy, if you can advance the slide once further, we summed this up in terms of our ambition should be a 10-fold increase. A 10-fold increase in improvement in terms of project delivery, by using better data. And this is what we mean, particularly around those kind of things that we really want to try. And it doesn't seem to be a strategy once you translate it in the other way of saying it, and rather than only having 0.5% of projects delivering against their targets, if we only in 5 years can get that target up to 5% of projects. So rather than 1 in 200, 1 in 20 projects delivering on time, on budget, and particularly on benefits will be a major step change in the industry. And that will have secondary benefits in terms of improving project productivity, improving the learning between projects, which is clearly an enabler of this. And we believe that particular use of better analytics, understanding better the data that we're coming from and turning that into an asset to drive this improvement is a key. With that, I'd like to hand over to Martin now to sort of talk us through sort of the enablers that we see behind this and how as a task force we think we've set out in our white paper a framework to bring these enablers together and advance them further in the next 5 years.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. Thank you. So actually what we're going to do next is we're going to ask you a couple of questions as the audience, just to see what you think. It's fantastic. We've got nearly 250 people that have dialed in. What are your views? Yeah, what's stopping us from delivering change at this scale? What do you think are the barriers, are the things that are preventing these things? It's not the lack of data. It's change management, money, politics, management culture within senior management. Not learning lessons, yeah, very interesting. Behaviors, skills, willingness. There's a lot from a sort of cultural perspective that's coming up. Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now let's flip it around. So what are the things that are going to enable us to deliver this vision? Education, leadership, skills, yeah, ownership, leadership, education, upskilling, training. Yeah, interesting. Lots and lots of questions, lots and lots of answers around. Yeah, again, it comes back to that sort of literacy and understanding for lots and lots of people, which ties very closely into the sort of the cultural barriers and change the issues that we saw from the previous question. Fantastic. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you for sharing your views. That'll help as we get into the panel session as well, just in terms of some of the perspectives that we provide. Before we do that, we've got our next our next panel session, which is 4 different perspectives from across the industry. So we're going to hear from Annalisa from the Open Data Institute. Then we're going to hear from Grant Findlay from Sir Robert McAlpine to provide a construction perspective. And we've got Darren from the Office of National Statistics to sort of broaden this out in terms of the different types of projects that people deliver. And then finally, we've got Jennifer from BAE Systems, who's going to talk us through some of the perspectives from a defence perspective. So, Annalisa, I'll hand over to you to get things going. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth, and good morning, everyone. I'm here on behalf of Stuart Coleman, the Director of Business Development at the Open Data Institute. So the Open Data Institute was co-founded in 2012 by the inventor of the web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and the expert of artificial intelligence, Nigel Shadbolt, to advocate for the innovative use of open data to affect positive change across the globe. And as part of a mission, we work with companies and government to build an open and trustworthy data ecosystem. And the reason why we recognize this initiative and the task force convene is because it can bring about similar positive change and benefits to organizations working in and around the construction sector, comparable to wider industries that we have worked with. And I will be sharing some examples with you, within which data sharing has driven transformation change. Some examples, as I said, include our work in financial services for open banking, and the work that we did with Lloyd's Register Foundation. On top of these examples, UDI also provides a portfolio of free open tools available on our website to support organization to better share data and identify the priority use cases within their organization. As part of our wider programs, we also offer learning and education support to enable individuals and organizations to build better capacity and skills, notably in data and AI literacy, and also around the growing domain of data ethics. And finally, I would like to mention our Data Institutions program, which is a dedicated program at UDI that we're growing to explore and looking to help industry, government, and wider society to professionalize data sharing. That's it from my side.
Brilliant. Thanks, Annalisa. From here, I'd like to pass over to Grant Findlay to share some perspectives of what's going on in construction. Grant, are you muted?
Well spotted. That's the schoolboy error from the start. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for hand-holding me through that one, Gareth. Yeah, my name's Grant. I'm delighted to be here today and delighted to be supporting the task force. I work for Sir Robert McAlpine, which is a UK-based construction company. I've got a project background. I've worked for remarkably nearly 30 years in project management of infrastructure and building projects. And like Tim described earlier, I feel like I've been using data all my career. But I'm a really reasonably recent convert to the potential of data analytics. I'm hugely excited about what we're here to talk about today. As Alex has already said, construction and construction projects are a big impact on the economy. Construction accounts for about 8% of UK GDP, or at least it did do. But I think if anything, it's going to play a bigger role in the recovery of the UK and as we move forward in terms of, we're already seeing government commitment on infrastructure investment, but also private investment through recovering the value in our pension funds is going to drive further activity in built environment. It employs about 2 million in the workforce, and a lot of UK's construction expertise is exported around the world. However, it's an incredibly fragmented industry in the UK. There are over 200,000 construction-related companies, and thus our knowledge and expertise and our data is hugely dispersed and in silos all over the place. It's also a highly competitive industry, largely cost-based, and it really creates a very negative driving force. You're only really as good as your last project, and as a result, we don't really make improvements, and that's been borne out by some of the data you've seen already. I'd like to think our project performance in construction is not as bad as Alex says, but perhaps it is. From the smallest house extension to major governments, we read headlines of bad news stories about delays, cost overruns, and regrettably, almost every single construction project that completes in the UK suffers from post-completion defects, which we'd all like to eliminate. It's a real waste of time, effort, and cost. Wouldn't it be great if we could properly understand how some of these problems arose so we could all avoid falling into similar traps? The step change in performance of the industry would be quite significant. That all sounds a bit negative, but there are real glimmers of hope. There's been a significant industry investment and government investment in innovation, digital transformation and collaboration. And as we've heard already, COVID has really accelerated the need to change, managing people, safety, productivity, health and efficiency, costs. And I think COVID's also accelerated the digital transformation in the industry. Almost overnight, 6 months ago, most of our businesses in our sector transferred, as many as you all did, to this sort of platform. And we've managed to keep going and in fact improve a lot of what we've done in the time. A little personal story, COVID also exemplified for me collaboration and data-backed decision-making in a joint approach between the Department of Health, designers, suppliers, contractors in the swift deployment of Nightingale hospitals around the UK back 4 or 5 months ago. There was really great examples of sharing lessons learned, pulling data about procurement and materials to inform decision making, and co-creating better guides for procurement to inform better decision making. So I'm really optimistic we're in the right place now to transform. On a personal note, our McAlpine journey and my journey has taken us from being data analytics novices to real advocates and promoters in little under 2 years. We started dabbling with data analytics back, some very simple analytics tools back about 2 years ago to look at how we can improve our work winning activity, looking at internal and external data sets. And I was amazed in a very short spaces of time, we were able to create some really valuable insights that really helped the teams improve decision making and improve productivity. About the same time, we joined the project data analytics community. We met all sorts of new types of people, data analysts and data scientists. We heard great stories from how data analytics have been used in other industries, but they were really relevant to the challenges we faced in our business and on our projects. We participated in the first and every single project hack since, which is the PDA community hackathons, and using fairly simple data sets relating to initially to deliveries and access control from our projects, we gained some valuable insights into project efficiency and productivity. And over the space of a weekend, with putting the right people together, we've been able to develop useful tools and applications to improve health, safety and well-being and quality control on our sites, all based on our pooled data, but also data from other similar organisations facing similar challenges. Skills on that front, which has come up in terms of feedback from the audience and things we need to change, we recognise, like every business, is where on earth do you start? And we started by training our project staff in simple data analytics techniques. And from that, they've been able to start to transform their own working days. And as a consequence, data analytics is not seen as a threat to their employment, but actually a benefit to them. And that bottom-up approach has been adopted more readily and quickly than any top-down, centrally controlled data initiatives. So what does the future hold? Well, informed by our hackathon experiences, our vision is to create a construction community that is pulling project data for the benefit of everyone in that community. Last year, we led, with a number of other people on this call, a bid to Innovate UK to fund the establishment of a construction data trust. That would be a collaboration of construction organisations designing, mobilising and demonstrating the benefits of pooling data for our industry. Unfortunately, that bid was unsuccessful. Apparently, feedback went, we were too transformational in our thinking and it required collaborative behaviours that simply didn't exist in the industry. We weren't ready for it. Pleased to say, never knocked down by a refusal, which spurred us on. And now we have over 80 organisations who voice support for an open data approach in the construction sector. They do want to transform and they do want to collaborate on data to see what better outcomes we can create. In the last six months, we've stood up a construction data trust. We've created the governance framework and we've put in place the infrastructure to enable data to be pooled and insights to be created. And we're currently in discussion with several construction organisations across the sector to share data relating to health and safety and productivity. And we're soon hoping to pilot a project around priority use cases and expect to be able to report the outcomes of that in the next few months. My appeal to everyone on the call is, as opposed to going off and developing apps and dashboards individually, why don't we come together and join us in working together to pool data, to develop solutions more efficiently and to create better insights for us all. Delighted to be engaged with the task force. I see a group of like-minded organisations and people who really have an ambitious vision which we support. And we're really looking forward to sharing our learning in terms of challenges with the Construction Data Trust and as a business, but also learning from other organisations to accelerate our journey in the construction sector. Thanks, Gareth.
Brilliant. Thank you, Grant. Thank you. Super. So next up, we've got our next perspective, which is from Darren Jaundrill, who's a Deputy Director at the Office for National Statistics, leading on the census programme. Darren.
Thanks, Gareth, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, given Tim's introduction, dependent on where you are in the world. It's great to see so many people supporting this launch event, and thank you, Gareth, for that introduction by calling me the Deputy Director for the Office of National Statistics. I fear I've just been promoted. There are a few of us, but yes, I'm the Deputy Director for Programme Delivery at the Office of National Statistics, and I'm currently leading the Census and Data Collection Transformation Programme, which is one of the government major programmes and something that involves everyone in the UK, because we will all be filling in our census forms, I'm sure we'll have no non-completions this time around. I've been in and around project management for I was horrified the other day when I realised it's approaching over 15 years now, which is making me feel very old. And I'm a self-confessed geek when it comes to project management. I get very geeky, particularly where there's data involved. I'll always be found looking at data and what's it trying to tell us. And I think particularly in my current role, there is so much surrounded by data, and actually gathering the insight from it is the challenge. And if I can try and portray it in a bit of an analogy, and we'll see how this resonates with people. But very often I'll get a phone call or a Skype message these days saying, "Oh, we've got a milestone that's gone red." And the analogy I use is very often I'm told there's a fire over there. Would you like us to go and put it out? Whereas actually what I'd like to know is there's some fuel and something that might spark, and there's a potential for a fire over there. Would you like us to do something about it? And I often find that in my life, I'm dealing a lot with the former than the latter. And I think that's because we've got lots of data and we're collecting lots of data, but very often it's retrospective. It's used for reporting, or it's using to underpin the controls, but actually it's the insight that I want to get to. And once we get to the insight, we can start bringing in the power of AI and machine learning and lots of, I've seen some wonderful bots recently demoed to me. I've met Judy, John, and James are the three bots I've met who are trying to get to grips with project controls, and that stuff is really exciting. But it's not just exciting; it's absolutely crucial, because if we're going to deliver the value that project management truly can deliver, what we need to be doing is releasing people from turning that massive wheel of reporting and data and information. We need to try and automate as much of that as possible. We need to make sure we're capturing the right stuff at the right time, and then force ourselves to be future facing. So yes, absolutely, we need to look at what's happened from a lessons learned perspective, but then it's, well, what do I need to do about that? And in my role, it's about the decision. So what decision do I need to make? Or is it when do you need me to make a decision? And as soon as we get to that point, we'll actually start to be able to transform the way projects are delivered. So that's why I'm involved with the task force, and I'm very excited to be so. Data quality workstream is the one that I'm leading on, and I've always back in my career in Network Rail, I was a bit of a data quality geek. So it seems to be following me around. I can't get rid of data quality, but it is crucial, because without that quality, and I emphasize it's quality, it's not about standardizing across the profession, but without getting that quality, again, it's rubbish in, rubbish out. There is another acronym, but for politeness, I won't use it. But rubbish in, rubbish out. You know, we're never going to manage it. In terms of what we're doing within my program, so we've just completed a recruitment campaign to hire a group of program planners who, rather than being in the PMO, will be embedded within different areas of the program, supported by the planning team in the PMO. We are looking to put each of them through the project data analytics apprenticeship, to be able to give them that wider skill set and capability to be able to drive some of the project data and project reporting. We're looking to look at what project data we're capturing. We have to be very careful here, because I've got a balance to strike between doing this work, which it isn't just innovation, it's actually vital, and actually disrupting an in-flight program. So I've got a bit of a challenge in terms of being able to make sure that whatever we're producing over here doesn't disrupt something over there. Because quite clearly, if I was to turn around to the national statistician and say, oh, the census is being delayed because of some project controls innovation I'm doing, I won't be a deputy director at the Office for National Statistics for much longer. So we, there is that balance to strike, but we recognise the value that if we start to capture some of this data in a different way, transform the way we use it, and then start to leverage it through things like Power BI and tools that are already readily available, we'll be able to generate some insight-driven decisions, and then we can start bringing in some of that really quite sci-fi type stuff with AI. So I'm hugely passionate about this. In terms of wider government, the case is there and made. You know, the major projects portfolio is 125 projects, just under 450 billion live cost, and that's just the major projects portfolio. On top of that, there's all the other projects that government are doing from within departments. So you can expect that figure to be far, far higher if you were to look across government. So I'm working with colleagues across government and heads of profession to look at where we can leverage this and take a bit of a standardized approach if we can across government, so that actually we can share the progress that we're making and be able to work as one civil service on items like this, which at the end of the day benefit us all. I think there's time for questions later, so I will stop there. Suffice it to say, there is lots to do in this space, I think, across the profession, and I really want to get to that point where across all industries and across all sectors, we've got, you know, that PMO team coming to us and saying, there's some stuff over there that we think is going to cause a problem. Do you want us to go and do something about it, rather than tell us after the fire has started? I'll hand back to you, Gareth.
Super, thank you, Darren. Thank you. That's brilliant. So next up, we've got Jennifer Osborne, who is the group performance director at BAE Systems. Jennifer.
Hello, and thank you again for the group performance director title and announcement. It's great to be here today, and I found myself nodding with each of the contributions from folks today, and I'm sure our audience is doing likewise. Hopefully I can add to that. Jennifer Osborne, I joined BAE Systems about 12 years ago in an engineering and project management role, and been interfacing with data ever since. A little bit about the company, first of all. It's an international defence and security company. We're based here in the UK and have home markets in the USA, Saudi Arabia, Australia and India. And I think the challenge that we're all reflecting on is equally experienced in those countries, and we find ourselves having a similar conversation in all those areas. We're about 82,000 people, and our portfolio is evenly split between designing and manufacturing products and then their enduring support and upgrade, and it covers air, land, sea and cyber. And as a result, the portfolio generates mountains of data. I dread to think how much sits in Iron Mountain, and indeed how far it goes back. Here in BAE, we consciously have committed to making better value from our data going forward. And what we aim to achieve by doing that is, one, increasing customer confidence in project delivery and the value for money that they gain from us. Secondly, it's about increasing company profit generation. And the third, and equal to those first two, are engaging our employees in greater value add activities by deploying smarter digital tools to do the dull aspects, and then freeing them up to engage in more of the intelligent, where they can contribute their insights from the analysis that they're doing. So those are, you know, three outcomes that really are driving the engagement we have in and around our data. What does our data look like? Well, the programs that you kind of see grayed out on this slide, variety of platforms and products, they're typically hugely complex and they span multi-years. And we're not just talking single-digit years, we're talking 10s, 20s of years in that design and development, manufacture and integration, and then the through-life support. And in that period, we are working with partners in the hundreds, from supply chain and customer, thousands of SMEs, and we're all delivering in a highly regulated customer environment. So how we manage our data and who accesses it is really important to us. The takeaway challenge is our data is complex, it's voluminous, it's multi-sourced, it's dispersed and not typically prescribed to a standard that has commonality. It definitely faces multiple data classifications, meaning that not all data is available to all people. So a lot of people might feel they're just getting snapshots. And we're working hard to better understand. And I think COVID has brought around the really get on top of collaboration tools and make them, you know, part and parcel of how we do business. So that's one way today that BIE is dealing with some of that complexity. If I move into the other aspect of our company, it operates in multiple countries. And as a result of many mergers and acquisitions, the second takeaway challenge that we face is that we're not operating on a single ERP system or data warehouse. The data standards are not common, and certainly the analytical tools and project control systems that we use tend to all be very different. That lack of standardization and commonality introduces huge variability, and it becomes a huge source of frustration for the leaders, the program leaders who are trying to drive in synergies and better understand the lessons that can be learned from prior programs or programs that are happening across in other states. So we've recently created data governance standards, and within that we talk around standardizing our KPIs. We're looking to deploy those across multiple programs in order to balance both leading and lag indicators and what we're doing, and allow those kind of program insights to really generate up so that we've got business insights that can be shared across multiple markets. This evolving workplace today, we do recognise the challenges, but what it does mean for our people is that we're expecting them to be multi-skilled, to operate in those different dimensions. But we want more from them. We're looking for them to be leaders. We're looking for them to be creative. And increasingly, we're asking them to be digitally savvy. And with digitally savvy, we're kind of talking about data and how they manage data, how they engage with data, how they in turn are using it to get better, stronger outcomes for the business. And it spans across multi-functions, so project management, engineering, supply chain, and we're inviting them to work together in order to create that bigger value. And when we talk about being data savvy, what do we mean? It's being capable of combining technical understanding of data, analysis and visualization methods to put data into context and present actionable insights that are meaningful. So it's a real tall order that we're putting on our people at this moment in time, and probably why I feel most compelled to take the lead and sponsor the skills piece across the Data Analytics Task Force, and hopefully bring some thoughtful insights to how we go about collaboratively to upskill, to enhance that capability that we're all seeking. So the combination of the challenges that I've described and the expectations that I think we all share really value being part of the Data Analytics Task Force. And we hope through the cross-industry and academic collaboration, we understand and can plot our journey to getting better value from our data in the future. Gareth, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. So you've heard about the challenge. You've heard about the perspectives that we've got from across industry. You've heard the vision that we've set forward of a 10-fold improvement over 5 years, based on that 1 in 200 projects delivering within the iron triangle that Alex laid out. So what are your thoughts on the vision? If you move to the next slide, Murph. Yeah, let us know what you think. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Actually, it's that 10-fold vision is too high, or in fact too low. It doesn't go far enough. What do you think? Okay, so far lots and lots thinking it's bold and visionary, but it hitting the mark there or thereabouts. Interesting to see we've got some that disagree, which would be really interesting for us to pick up in the Q&A as we go. Fascinating that more people thinking actually we've not gone far enough with the vision and that we should have gone further. That's brilliant. Okay, but definitely overwhelmingly agreement that we're more or less on the mark. Fantastic. Okay, well, with that, what I'd like to do next is pass on to Martin Paver, who's the Chief Executive of Projecting Success. And so much of this is Martin's sort of vision and drive, and he's going to talk us through the detail of how we're going to set up and how we're going to achieve this vision. Martin.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. Really appreciate it. We've had some great insights so far in terms of the team about where we can take project data analytics. Potentially, it's game changing. This is not just about making projects better in terms of transforming project delivery performance. This is really disruptive in terms of the way we start to procure capabilities in the future. So through that, we'd like to walk you through these component parts of the vision. So next slide, please, Matt. So we see a total of 8 connected focus areas. And in terms of these connected focus areas, this is not in priority order because they are interrelated, interdependent. You'll see more of this in the white paper document, which is now online, and we'll share that with you in the final slide of this presentation. So the first bullet there is about establishing a pipeline of these innovation challenges and opportunity. So I think our challenge at the moment, we speak to a lot of innovators, these small companies, and they're lacking access to data. So they've got some really bright ideas, and that might be through the application of things like off-the-shelf technologies today. And they're struggling to access that data, and they're struggling to access the opportunities. And it's gaining access to these people as well. It's gaining access to the construction companies, the defence companies, and making their voice heard. And what we've also lacking at the moment is this consensus in terms of the challenges that we'd like to be tackled. So we're setting something up now, and there's a meeting on it next week, which is to look at health and safety, for instance. And through health and safety, rather than working up 400 separate dashboards, 400 separate apps, loads of insights that go with it, why don't we all work together and just do it once? And if we do that very, very well with an agreed taxonomy, we start to save lives. There is no commercial advantage in this for those companies. And there's a lot more advantage by all working together and delivering this. And it starts to open up all these innovation opportunities for everybody. So what we'd like to do, which is the second point, is about this democratization of these data-driven solutions. So rather than working up hundreds of separate dashboards that all do the same thing, so health and safety dashboards, performance dashboards, etc., why don't we work up 3 or 4 standards, exemplars of those dashboards and start to pool them. Everybody can build on them and to fork that code and make them better. And it's not just the dashboards, it's the data pipelines that go with it as well. So some of the DAX code or Python code that goes with it. So we can give them away, we will start to move a lot quicker, and data volumes then start to shoot up. What that means is then once data volumes start to shoot up, we then start to open up opportunities for these top-end companies, a bit like Nodes and Links and a bit like Nplan, who can work in that space and do some very, very clever work at the top end. So we democratize the basics, which are involved with things like Amazon services or Microsoft services. What we also want to do is to drive up these data skills for all project professionals and to bring data people into project delivery as well. So we need to drive consensus in terms of whether those skills are centralized. So do you have a centralized data team, or do we federate it out across every single member of a project team? And that needs to be talked through. We need some position papers on it, and we need to see what's sort of happening at the moment across the industry. If it's centralized capabilities, then that starts to eat into the current roles, project control roles or BIM roles, etc. And it starts to affect those career pathways. So what do we do about the integration between data science and standard career pathways? We need to look at that self-training of people using YouTube all the way through to development schemes, degree programs and master's programs. All of that needs to be fleshed out. So what we need is some position papers, some thought pieces, and some documents as well, where we work with organisations such as the Association for Project Management, the APM, ECITB, where we start to bring some standards around this, and we can help people grapple with these challenges. What we also need to do is to evidence this potential through research. It's all fragmented research at the moment, so I get lots of calls and contacts from people who's doing masters and PhDs saying, can we help with surveys, can we help with this, can we help with that? Engagement tends to be quite low because there's so many of them. We tend to just finish up spamming the community. If we can find a different way of doing that, then we can help each other out much better. Industry is moving so quickly as well, and this technology is moving so quickly. In some cases, that research is struggling to keep up with it. So what can we do to make sure we align all of those investments so we start to deliver optimal benefit against those agreed challenges? So next slide, please, Murph. So that's the first four. And then we talk about this data quality and standards. So in terms of project data, it's very different. It doesn't come out of a control panel, right? It doesn't come out the back of Amazon. It's very messy and of variable quality. In terms of quality, some of that data is coming from processes which are 20 and 30 years old, and it's been dictated by somebody else. We've not taken a step back in saying, what are the problems that we're trying to solve? And have we got the right data today to answer those problems? We don't have agreement on terms associated with data quality and standards. We don't have the taxonomies, the ontologies, so the sort of breakdown of these interconnected data sets, and we don't have the standards in place. So that's a challenge that Darren's going to be sort of grappling with Joe Jolly. In terms of data access, so Grant mentioned this earlier about data access and the Construction Data Trust. So Grant's leading this work stream. So we've got the pockets of the data at the moment, and the problem is we lack the data volumes to feed these artificial intelligence training models. And in terms of those company data sets, for some companies, they're probably only delivering that sort of project every 5 or 6 years. If we pull that data across thousands of projects, we've now got the data to start to drive these insights. So the question is, can we start to securely pool this data for the collective benefit? It's not sharing data. It's not me giving you data unconstrained and then vice versa. It's about pooling it and making sure we put the right controls in place so those commercial sensitivities have all been protected, but we start to unlock this data to artificial intelligence so we can do the really, really cool stuff. So we've done a lot of work on this through the Construction Data Trust, and we'll be building on that in the coming months. We're talking to the Oil and Gas Authority and lots of other organisations about building out these principles. Ultimately, what we'd like to do is to connect all these data trusts together, because there's a lot of commonality from sector to sector. What we'd also like to do is to build out and start to leverage this community of practice. So we've got 6,000 people across the project data analytics community. We're working closely with the PMI, APM, and the Major Projects Association as well. We're reaching out to BCS as well. We'd like to bring more and more communities together so we can work with people to solve these problems that we're grappling with. It's to get them involved in these work streams, and it's also to get them involved in things like hackathons as well. So it's to share good practice, upskill people, and keep them plugged into the very latest thinking. It's also about connecting experts, driving up collaboration, and reducing these barriers to implementation, which I think is a really exciting place to be. What we also need to be doing, because it is quite siloed inside of companies and it's siloed inside of a sector, is to recognise project delivery approaches are very similar from sector to sector. The thing that we're buying in terms of the project and the capability is probably different, but if we look at integration issues and we look at procurement issues and we look at commercial issues, there is a lot of similarity. So projects are unique, but there's a lot of similarity between all of them. So what we're trying to do through this task force is to facilitate this cross-sector collaboration, which is sharing all these good ideas and good practice. We'll also be reaching out to dig deeper into these existing initiatives and start to sort of collaborate with digital twins, BIM data standards, etc. We do not sit in isolation. It's a very connected word. It's not just about project management either. So we need to look at all of these project delivery roles, and it might include document controls, commercial, BIM, etc. So those are the main themes. And I'd like to move on, next slide please, Merv, into the 6 work streams. So we've boiled those 8 initiatives down into those 6 work streams, and those are leads for each of those work streams. And what we've tried to do is to make sure we've got at least one person per work stream who's leading it, and they're directly responsible back to the task force for the delivery of that work stream. And some of those will be pushing at pace. So solutions development, we've already kicked it off. We've got the terms of reference, which are in draft. We'll be publishing those in the next week or 2. And we've got a hackathon coming up, which is going to be starting to look at this health and safety challenge. So in terms of engagement work stream as well, Andy's leading that with Tim. And we're making sure that in terms of the engagement work stream, we've got people like Andy and Tim who are disconnected from the commercial incentives associated with engagement, so it's nice and clean. In terms of these work streams, we don't have any budget at the moment, so it's all focused on agile delivery. So we'll be working up content, publishing that content and releasing it quickly. In terms of the consultation process, we would like to consult, but it's not a big organization which is funded by somebody. It's a very small set of volunteers who's coming together to make this happen. So it's more about getting product out the door, iterating it and adapting as we go along. So what we're looking for now is for people to engage in these work streams who can put their shoulder behind it and start to drive output. I was asked as well, who owns the task force, and nobody does. It's driven by the 12 people who have stood up to make a difference. We've accepted responsibility to make this vision a reality, but we cannot do it alone. It needs to be a community-driven approach, and we'd welcome your involvement. So next slide, please, Merv. So in terms of the roadmap, the first step on that roadmap is the mobilization, and we've achieved that. This is our milestone today. So we first met in June, developed the white paper, which is released today. It's on the website. And we've hit the launch event. So those first 3 milestones have been achieved, and we're delighted with that. So what we need to do now is to drive up awareness and engagement. We've got to inspire people, upskill them, and take away these barriers. And some of those barriers are real and some of them are perceived. Conceptually, all of this case for change is very, very clear, but we can't evidence it yet. So what we need to do is to work together to start to evidence these benefits of investing in project data analytics. We all hold the key to this. Rather than each of us building a separate case, let's all do this together. Let's all drive the economic case for project data analytics and the investment that we need to make in it. We all need to build momentum, identify local champions, and really drive engagement at every level. A 10 times improvement is a game changer, but we can go further than that. It's such an aspirational vision, but it needs bold leadership, drive, and broad community support. We're going to be working up the detail of the roadmap in the coming months, and that's not just the task force doing it, it's through the work streams of which you're welcome to be a part. We need to do this together, and we need to understand our cadence and capacity. So what rate can we do this? And that's why we need an agile approach. If we can go faster, we will go faster. So final slide, in terms of call to action. The problem statement is at the moment, we don't have predictable and repeatable projects or work packages. So we can get inside of that problem and start to unpack it, and we can leverage project data analytics to inform better decisions and drive a 10 times improvement in project delivery. So the call to action is to mobilize this and spread the word. We need to demonstrate the case for change, the business case for change, and start to bring these examples together and all start to work together to democratize some of those examples and demonstrate what the impact of that action is. We also need to build momentum, which is all of you get involved in these work streams. And it's from meetups to hackathons to capability development. It's about investing in your own future and the future of your business. Some of this is going to be really disruptive. And if you don't adapt, you won't be able to keep up with it. So I think together we can start to transform how we deliver projects. So if I could pass back to Gareth now, I think Gareth's going to wrap up and take some questions.
Yes, absolutely. So last question from us to you. Have we inspired you enough to get involved? Where are you thinking? What are your thoughts? Is this critical to your role that you have at the moment and sort of your future? Is it other end of the spectrum, you're going to just sit and wait and see for the time being, or you want to get involved but you're not quite sure? Or yeah, the other option being you're interested. It sounds interesting. You'll keep tabs on it, but not necessarily anything to do at the moment. Okay, interesting. Lots and lots of people wanting to get involved. Lots of people saying they will get involved. They're going to get involved. This is a key part of their role. Very small minority thinking that they're going to wait and see, and not yet inspired or convinced enough. And then a quarter of people there or thereabouts wanting to stay informed. Great. Okay, numbers are slowing down a bit now. So shall we move on to our Q&A and give you the opportunity to ask our panelists some questions? So as a reminder, we've got Professor Tim Broyd, Andy Murray, we've got Grant Findlay, we've got Annalisa, who's standing in for Stuart Coleman, Darren, Jennifer, and Martin as well. So over to you for your questions. So first up, is there analysis that suggests that data analytics is a high priority improvement lever relative to lots and lots of other ideas that are going on? And perhaps this is something that Alex, do you want to jump in on this one? And Martin too, I'll come to you next.
Sure. We do believe so. So we see generally in terms of it's a sort of the high improvement levers why we think it's so important is particularly comparing the digital leaders against digital laggards. And we see sort of the productivity the use of data has enabled, and particularly also sort of the way of what comes then sort of secondary and what data analytics enable is then to think more evidence-based about the way we work. So having more targeted innovation and demonstrably so that innovation that allows us to invest in innovation, we kind of need to know where we are at the moment and what change it actually makes. And nothing of that would be possible without data.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. Thank you. So in fact, in the interest of time, what I might do, unless there was anything in particular you wanted to add there, I think that's, yeah, fine. So we move on. Andy, do you want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think having developed some best practice guides and frameworks and so on, obviously I wanted to do that based upon evidence of what's out there. And that leads in terms of I was really very aware of some of the roles I've held that what I write down might get followed, and so therefore it's sort of sort of heavy shoulders, if you like, in terms of the weight of what could happen there. And in terms of data analytics or the evidence base, as Alex said, if we're not using an evidence base to improve practice, then all we're doing is winging it, and I think that's just unacceptable. So whether it's the most important thing, but it's critical, because otherwise all those other things that people are talking about that we need to improve, it's just going to be based upon ideas and intuition rather than evidence. So it's really important.
Brilliant, thanks, Andy. Yeah, that critical foundation for everything else. Tim, did you want to jump in on this question around tenfold improvement?
Yeah, I don't think it's good enough, but I think we've got to be sensible and sensitive to the way we go about these things. I mentioned in my opening remarks that, in my opinion, and I know it's shared by quite a number of other people, that the hardest part in a technology-enabled change is taking people with you. It's getting people who are doing things one way to want to start them doing things in another way. And that's not helped by the fragmented nature we have, certainly in construction, but also, I believe, in aerospace, oil and gas, etc. So part of this is improving people's data skills. Another part is understanding and working on what it means for people to be more open in sharing the things they're doing. And that needs, that needs an amount of protection. Sorry, it's probably the wrong word. So that people are right. People will rightly be concerned that they'll be giving away their company's crown jewels. I used to run for a number of years, getting on 20 years ago, an organization called CIRIA, C-I-R-I-A, not the country. And that was all about getting people around a table, people from competing companies, and from them all, teasing out of them what best practice methods were in a given topic. It worked very well with people who wanted to share and could see the benefits of sharing. It worked not so well with people who thought that knowledge is power. I better keep it to myself. Sorry, I've spoken too long.
No, brilliant. No, that's great. Thanks, Tim. And I think you've, as well as this question, you've started to answer the next question too, which is around from a sort of cultural perspective. Where's that gone? We've lost that. We've lost that question. The questions are coming and going very rapidly. So
I'm happy to come in on the people question.
Do you want to jump? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So if I remember the question correctly, it was about actually, how much is culture within project delivery, if I can paraphrase the question, and the importance of people and culture. And look, I don't think there's anyone here who would disagree that it's people that deliver projects. So if you get the people bit right, you can usually get the rest aligned. So in any project environment, you've got to put people and culture at the core. Certainly from a government perspective, we have a project delivery standard, and we also have a project delivery capability framework. And anyone that looks at that framework, it's publicly available. The behaviours and the culture aspect are very much at the core of it. And the new IPA vision very much has people and principles as the core as well. So it's vital that we bring people along on this journey. So you can't just rock up and go, right, we're changing it all, because anyone who's in a business change environment will know that's not the way you bring about change. We're going to bring about the transformation. It is going to be disruptive, but it's really important that we bring people along with us. And I think when you, as we have today, talk about the case for why we want to do this, which is that it'll improve the quality of delivery, it'll improve the insights, and actually it'll release people from some of those really, let's face it, quite tedious bureaucratic tasks that we're just turning a wheel. It'll release them from that to actually deliver the value they want to input, which is usually on capability building, education, and assurance across a project environment. So people and culture absolutely has to be at the heart of this, and I know it will be featuring not just within the skills part of the task force work streams, but it's going to be the reason why it's not there on its own is because I think it's integrated throughout the entire work of the task force. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, thanks, Darren. Thank you. So next question then, in terms of tools that are available to project data analytics, and I think so. there are so many opportunities. Did anyone have a specific example that they wanted to chime in and provide? Yeah, Martin, go ahead.
In terms of tools, I think there are just sort of hundreds of them out there. I think the easiest way to get started in this is in Microsoft land. So just start off with things like Power BI and start to visualize some of your data that you've got. And once you can do that well, you'll want to start to move into data pipelines. So it's then start to make sure that you can clean your data up and aggregate your data, which is using some of the DAX formulas as well in things like Power BI. And then you move into Python and start to clean your data up and associate your data. And to integrate different data sets together, which you can do as part of Power BI as well. And then you can move into automation, so robotic process automation, where you get rid of these dull jobs that Darren's been talking about. And then you can move into apps as well, so you can start to get your data produced at source. And instead of fat fingering things into keyboards and into databases, if you can pick them up at source, that might be through Internet of Things, or it might be through app development. And if you can do that, you start to integrate your entire ecosystem. And don't just look at your data either. Visualize this end to end as well. So it needs to be end to end in terms of the project lifecycle, end to end in terms of your supply chain as well. And once you've got that, it becomes seamless, and you can start to do automated document analysis. You can do automated invoicing, etc. So there's just so much to go at. This is white space for a lot of companies at the moment. And if you go at this, it's almost limitless.
Super. Thank you very much. Next question, particularly around government data and the reticence at a departmental level to share that. I guess here is where the national data strategy comes in and plays a really big part, where there is a recognition of that reticence and a real sort of shift of focus to making data available for and to recognize the opportunities that are available within data. Rather than sort of dwelling on that, unless there's anything particular that people wanted to pop up, there's a number of questions around sort of standardization and talking to the quality aspects that Darren, you particularly mentioned. Does standardization inhibit innovation, creativity, and improvement? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as I'm here from government, I don't think I should be seen to be dodging that previous question. So in terms of access to government data, look, you know, clearly we've got lots of project data, the national data strategy, and as we start to work through that and we start to work through where we can leverage those opportunities, clearly there'll be work to do that. And I imagine, and I know that the IPA are already working through that. It kind of goes back to the point I made earlier. There's just so much data. I think there's a piece of work to do first to actually look through what data are we capturing, why are we capturing it, and what value is it adding, and then we can sort of move from there. On the standardization point, I think if you go too far, it certainly can inhibit innovation and creativity. And I've certainly worked in environments where we have tried to standardize certain processes. So you certainly can if you go too far, but you have to do a little bit to have a commonality. So the taxonomy that we talked about, and a kind of common data dictionary almost, you've got to have some commonality and some way that when I say one thing, it means the same to Martin, it means the same to Gareth, it means the same to Grant, that actually we're talking a common language. How you then use that and how you develop that is where you can really drive the innovation and creativity, and then share that back into the mix. So I did a knowledge exchange with NASA a number of years ago, and they have the dynamic learning model actually just constantly circling around. And there is an element of standardization in there when you're trying to turn knowledge assets that are intrinsic into something that's more external and more standardized. But it's just a constant circle. So you need to do a little bit to get that commonality, but you've got to be careful you don't go too far. I'll stop there because the prof wants to talk.
Yeah, great. Tim, jump in.
Cheeky. Look, broadly speaking, the whole of British society revolves around standardization of one sort or another. The trick is to have sufficient standardization to allow good people a springboard and not quite so able people a crutch to operate. Just one very brief example, you know, I was at Atkins at a time when email was developed. Yes, I'm that old. The Atkins board had no part at all in innovation of email within the company. The part they played was to pull together the 6 or 7 or 8 different systems that had developed in different parts of the company and say, no, we can't have this as a company, we just need one system, right? And I think the same is true for this type of topic as well. You want to allow 1,000 flowers to bloom, yes, but also there has to be some underlying basic way of working.
So that's really interesting. And in fact, there is a specific question to Grant and sort of McAlpine about that 1,000 flowers approach that you mentioned. Yeah, do you want to talk to that, Grant?
I missed the question. I was so busy trying to track your attention. What was the question? I was going to talk about standardization, but what the question's found, right? I was just going to say I think on standardization, firstly, I think if anyone's done any sort of training around Toyota Way or lean thinking, the principle there is consistency and standardization is required before you could even begin to identify improvement opportunity. So I think that's important. I think the other point of standardization is it frees up time for creativity, is my experience. So actually, you cannot improve and innovate without standardization. That's a fundamental foundation for that. So what was the question? How do you ensure that the bottom-up approach yields to repeatable outcomes processes? Very good question. We haven't sorted that one yet, but yes, we are. It's the repeatability, I guess. It's the bottom-up approach is really empowering individuals to make the best use of the data they have accessible to them within their job and within their team, and the team are really getting engaged around that. We made sure our apprenticeships that we're developing with Martin and others is empowering people to actually create better outcomes locally. And what we're looking to do is engaging with those. We've created a community of those apprentices working together to sort of flag up and escalate good ideas and innovations, and we're just now developing the process of how we stand up those innovations to repeat them across the business. So we're in that sort of innovation factory process of how we develop those and accelerate them quickly, but no different from any other new value proposition, new innovation. I think it's creating a forum and a communication platform for getting them escalated and put on the right table, and given some sense of communication to the right people, which then allows us to give some prioritization and then some support to standing them up.
Brilliant, thanks, Grant. There's still a bunch of questions. We're not going to get through them all. I guess last two, there seem to be a couple of sort of themes coming through in a number of the questions. One around sort of confidentiality and commerciality. Yeah, Martin, is that something that you want to pick up in terms of the roots of some of these challenges?
Yeah, so I think this is overplayed, Gareth. I think there's been a lot of comments. Now, and I've personally been a campaigner for this for a few years, and I went to court to get hold of data and to show that the public interest is much greater than the individual sort of departmental sort of level interests, etc. And I think that there's two sorts of confidentiality agreements. There's those associated with public data, and there's those associated with commercially sensitive or competitive data. And both of those we can manage with a data trust type arrangement. Now, a data trust is something where you independently steward the data, and it's not the trust that owns the data owner owns the data, and it's up to them to say what they want to do with it. So they can build into that ownership model any agreements that they want to put around their data and say, I don't want to share my data with that person, but I can share it with those people. And it might be a research group over there, or it might be an app developer over there. What you can also do is put this through data pipelines where you can anonymize the data or pseudonymize the data. You can do things to it. You can add noise into it and start to disguise that data. So I'd imagine, and I think this is starting to happen already with Highways England, for instance, where they're now starting to contract for some of this data. Previously, it's been an exhaust plume out the back of a contract, but they're going to be contracting for it in the future and saying this data pipeline has now got some value for my future project delivery. And once we start to do that, we will change the ecosystem. So instead of bidding on a job because you're the cheapest necessarily, you might be bidding on a job and winning the job because you can get the most insights out of that data and transform the way we deliver the next project. So all of this confidential agreements and NDAs and things like that all can be sorted out through these agreements we're putting in place as part of a data trust. So it's all resolvable.
Super, thank you. So I'm conscious of the time. So what I'll do now is, I'll pass over to Tim for just some final remarks. I think the panelists are able to stay on the line for longer if there are individuals that want to stay on a bit longer and go through some more of the specific questions. There were a couple of comments that came in around the website, so details of that are available here. Yeah, we'll pick up afterwards. But Tim, over to you for some final remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. Thank you to all my co-presenters for what you've said over the last hour and a half or so. I will be brief. As Martin said, we have a task force of a dozen people who've been meeting over the last 3 months. Not the easiest time of year, not the easiest state of the UK to meet. Within 3 months, we've turned that round into a white paper, which is actually a blue paper, and a launch meeting, to which 250 people have come. So fantastic, hallelujah. Thank you so much for that. We held, I've been checking the numbers as we go, we held at over 250 right up until about 12. I would think then a number of people had other meetings to get to or got hungry or whatever. We're now at 190, so we've dropped off a little bit, but thank you so much. We've heard from different industry sectors, and we've heard that the issues that the task force or that we thought we might find when we started are actually held across industry sectors in the UK and across different countries. I said an hour and whenever ago that we'd be providing you with a vision and maybe hopefully to stimulate to want to take part. Now, what have we find? Okay, initial reaction. Nearly everyone thought the vision was good or perhaps not good enough. Thank you. When we asked for people for their thoughts about engagement with this, around about 3/4 of all of you said, yes, you wanted to get engaged, or even we want to get very engaged. So that's hugely supportive to what we're doing on the task force. We will take your comments, your questions seriously and try to respond to them as best we can. And I think we are now, I think we can say we have a firm foundation from which to move on into the future, and indeed we will. So thank you to all of you for attending. Thank you to my fellow task force members. I think you're going to close the meeting, or as you say, maybe not quite close it, Gareth.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim. Thank you. I'm sure that we'll now start to lose a number of people. But for anyone that does want to stay on for a little bit longer, we've still got questions that were there to be answered. There were a couple around the task force membership. So first off, we've got a question about whether or not it was open to new membership. Martin, did you want to jump in on that one?
Could I raise a point to everybody, please? And I'd plead with this, right? It's a community-driven venture, this. Please get on LinkedIn and Twitter, and if you've liked it today, let's spread this vision. Let's start to get loads of people involved in it, because the more people involved in it, the quicker we'll go and the faster we'll make things happen. So I want to say that first, Gareth. So what's the question you want?
Yeah, so 2 questions about the task force. One being, is it UK or international? And the other one being, is there any, is it closed to new membership?
So in terms of the final question, so it is close to new membership in terms of the task force 12. If it becomes 24 or 36, then it becomes too big and too unwieldy, and it loses its agility. And if you look at what we've done in a matter of 3 months, we've achieved quite a lot in a short period of time. All we're doing is facilitating. So what we want to do is to bring in a lot of other people into these work streams. So the task force is much bigger than the group of 12. It's about all of us working together to drive forward these work streams. And in terms of the international component, we've got to start somewhere. And this is a really big and bold endeavor. And we've got to start off with a scope that is manageable and deliverable. So let's start off with the UK first of all, and we can work with UK government, etc. Once we get some traction going, then we'd like to bring in more and more people from an international sort of community and start to solve it internationally. Well, that doesn't stop us from bringing sort of international contributions into the work streams, but some of the problems that we're trying to solve and some of those things in the work stream that I'm working on, solutions development, for instance, it's just constraining scope to make it deliverable. And then once we get a platform to build on, then we can take it global. Any more comments from these sort of members of the task force on that? Anything to add?
Martin, yeah.
I'll go quickly, Andy. Only to note that quite a number of the task force members themselves come from companies that operate multinationally, if not internationally, and so we inevitably have an influence from outside the UK in what we do anyway.
Yeah.
Andy.
Andy, did you want to jump in?
Yes, so I think Martin mentioned it earlier, we don't have a budget. We are working as volunteers for this initiative, and it will only succeed if we get many more volunteers helping with the work streams. So selfishly, as the engagement work stream sort of co-lead, if there are people still on the webinar that got project stakeholder engagement skills, communication skills and so on, please drop me a line, and we'll start getting some of the workstream engagement activities going. And I'm sure the other workstream leads will make a similar plea for enthusiasts to help them with their workstreams. So yeah, the more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned, as volunteers to help us with the task ahead.
Yes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Andy. There's a couple of sort of comments or questions around bringing data to life and making it more engaging and inspiring. Grant, I wonder if there's any examples that you've got from from some of the hackathons and some of the things that you've been doing around bringing it to life.
Yeah, pretty much every example's been inspiring to me, Gareth. I mean, I think, as I said at the beginning, I've been analysing data for my whole career in terms of making decisions around projects, but regrettably most of that's been poured over spreadsheets or large printouts of paper as it started off. It's got a bit more sophisticated, but what was really inspiring to me was at pretty much every hackathon, but I remember the first one because it's the first time I really saw it sort of come to fore. We had provided delivery data for a project, and we didn't think anything would come of this, but by the end of the second day, we were getting insights into which of our suppliers was likely to be late, why they were likely to be late, which routes they followed on roads, and there was some really powerful insights out of a really simple data set that enabled us to go back and have conversations with our partners and suppliers which probably information they didn't even realize themselves. So that was day one of the very first hackathon, and since then we've done some really cool image identification recognition tools around identifying health and safety issues on site, PPE compliance, and all of those are really those visual ones are really useful and really engaging with people, just demonstrating. And I guess the question probably stems from one of the challenges that Gareth and I have in our business, because we work together, is trying to engage our board and our other members of our team in what data analytics means and the benefit it can bring, and actually having visual solution, visual store, visual things to put in front of people, where there's a real, very tangible alignment to social well-being, health and safety, business benefit, is much more powerful than banging the table about please get involved in data analytics. So I guess we can probably share if we haven't already. We can, as I think many of the participants of the task force have put some case studies into the white paper. It might be useful for people to have a look at that. But if that isn't enough, then get back in touch with us and we can get some more colour and add some more colour and detail to that in terms of our examples of what we've got from the construction sector data.
Brilliant, thanks, Grant.
Could I pop in on that one, Gareth, if I may?
Yeah, of course, Darren. Yeah, jump in.
So I recognise the first bit of that about the data quality side. So that's what gives you the trust and confidence. So it is critical on the bringing it to life. Look, I think once you're able to turn what for a lot of people data is, and you know this will insult anyone who's a bit of a geek, but data's just a bit boring. It's a load of numbers and stuff. It's stuff that gets given to them and they have to try and digest. It's spreadsheets and Word documents, and it's just stuff. What you've got to be able to do is turn that into something that is visual, that is easy to see, that is actually showing you insights. And you know what we have to look at is look at what's happened, I would say, over the last few months in this country. You know, when have you ever thought that there would be a daily TV program that would show you bar charts and line graphs, and you'd actually have en masse a large amount of people genuinely interested in that data and going to ONS websites to actually interact with that data themselves and to understand that data more. So you've got to be able to bring it to life to let people in. You've got to be able to make it accessible, and then you've got to turn it into something. So I've often used the utopia dystopia headlines, where I produce like a one-pager, and on the left-hand side is the good headlines, and I literally do put them like they're BBC News 24 headlines. So the headlines, if the project goes well, project goes badly, here are the other headlines, and I'll use the data that the models is spitting out at me to feed that, to show why it might be good or why it might be bad, to help people engage with it. Then you start to move into potentially, if you have a good quality data model, you're able to see, I'm getting very passionate already, you're able to leverage things like simulations, where we could actually, I mean, we're one of the very few professions that don't really simulate. We just go for it, don't we? We kind of do the planning and we go, that's probably about right, and then we go for it. You know, can you imagine stepping on board an airplane, meeting the pilot, shaking their hand? Well, you wouldn't be able to shake their hand at the moment, but you know, nudging, you know, doing whatever we can do to meet the pilot and saying, you know, maybe how long have you been flying? Well, I haven't actually, but I planned the route, and I reckon I can probably have a good crack at it. You'd be horrified, you know, or when you're wheeled into surgery and you say to the surgeon, you know, how many times you performed this operation? Well, none actually, but I had a good go on the computer earlier and it seemed to go quite well. So we're one of the only professions that don't really simulate, and we're talking about huge values. So if we get the data quality right, the right data into a good pipeline, we then might be able to leverage, and there are organizations out there that do these simulations, all they need is the data to feed it. And we can actually then, potentially for major programs, it's not a huge amount to put aside. We could say to one of those organizations, can you now produce for me a project simulation? I know Andy will probably be very aware of the simulations I'm talking about that the Major Projects Association use. And you'd be able to say to your team, let's actually step through this program from start to finish. In a day, we could do 2 years. Let's go through the program start to finish, and let's see what happens. And you could have literally pictures of stakeholders ringing you and saying things that sound like the person that you interact with. You could see how your project might or could go. So you can start identifying, actually, we need to build capability there, or we need to build resilience there. And that for me is how you really can bring it to life. But it starts here today with all of this underlying foundation work that lets you get there, because we can't just leapfrog it, because all you'll do, you won't have the trust and confidence in the modeling.
Absolutely, and I think so. We've just dropped under 100, so I think probably this is as a last question then for everybody before we say goodbye. all of what you've just said, Darren, ties into this this sort of end state where we'd like to be in simulating and being able to understand the possibilities and getting to a point where we are very sort of statistical in our approach to projects. But actually, so much of it comes back to some of the contracts that we're locked into and that we're dealing with. And so, are there any insights from the panel, from the perspective of how that needs to change, or in fact how the work that we're doing will change contracts? Martin, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, and in terms of this question, it's got two components to it. I think if you're a client, you probably want to get your hands on loads of data. So if you start to contract for all of this and say, dear suppliers, give me all your data. I want to see your profit data. I want to see your full supply chain data, etc. That would be fine in a perfect world if we don't behave badly with that data. And I worked in government for 20 years and I saw some of my colleagues were using that data to go and beat the suppliers up with, squeeze the profits down, etc. Now, if we move to a state whereby we've got full transparency across all that data, I think that's a state that's probably 10, 15 years away. I don't think we've got the culture in place at the moment to be able to sustain that. So what we've got to do is recognize that some of this data is sensitive for those suppliers, and you've got to take them on a journey with you. And it's about being sort of trustworthy in the way that we deal with that data. So I think that's the way that a data trust starts to play into this, is that the data trust has got the full visibility of that data end to end. It's down to the data owners then to say, I'm happy to give somebody else visibility of that data subject to these rules. And it might be rules about aggregation or pseudonymization, anonymization, or you put an algorithm there, it spits an answer out. So I would say for client organizations, just be very, very careful about pushing this too fast and too hard. And I think a data trust starts to give you the answers to that. And Grant, have you got anything to add on that as chair of the data trust?
I think we're seeing contracts already asking for data, but it's coming in the access at the moment. It's coming in from the approach of BIM models and digital twins and that sort of stuff, and that's good, and that's helped to drive adoption of BIM and digital twins across the industry. But we've also seen examples of clients, as you say, asking for lots and lots of data, but it's not necessarily always the right data. And it's back to the point that Annalise made about use cases, and it's probably and probably Darren's point as well. It's about trying to work out what is it, why do people tune in every day to look at the ONS data? It's because they see a real value and purpose in that, and therefore there's some benefit, and it will change their behaviour or change their actions as a result of what they see or hear. And so therefore it's probably more important that the journey through here, whilst contracts might have to change to accommodate data access, what's more important, the cultural piece is absolutely fundamental, Martin, I agree, but also being really clear about what the purpose of that data is and how it's going to be used to benefit the client, the performance of the project, or the industry, whatever it is you're trying to improve. So I think there has to be that use case needs to be pretty compelling.
Superb. Yeah, thanks, Grant, and thank you to all the panelists. I'm conscious that we're losing people now, down to 80 odd. So thank you all for joining. Merv, are you able to just move on to the final slide so we can just put one last recap? So the white paper is available to download on the website under the resources section. There's also a form on the website for you to get involved and outline the different work streams that you want to participate in. Contact us, and look forward to talking to you then. Right, thank you all very much.